Hello people, VK3 Alpha Mike Lima again with the usual Saturday night streaming exercise. This week a significant historical film of CSIRO, the Australian Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation's background in radiophysics and specifically radioastronomy. And later on a visit to Jeff VK3VJS, where I filmed on Thursday this week. A bit of Paul Taylor, VK3HN, and his excellent YouTube channel. And then a little talk about band congestion, comparing band congestion, 80 metres specifically, between USA, Australia and Europe. And you may see some interesting comparisons when I show you screen grabs of various web-SDRs in those three locales. Anyway, it's 9:29. I'm just waiting for it to tick over to 9:30, and I always check the streaming. The streaming seems right. So we go back to that. CPU load 32%, so it's not too bad, and no lost frames. So looks like we go ahead into the transmission side. So I listen off 2 meters with this to my own transmission and making sure that everything's okay there. 9:29 still. Thank you to all the people who subscribe to the channel. I very much appreciate that, and the feedback that comes via channel comments and on the the chat strip next to the YouTube live stream. Okay, time. Hello, this is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima, and our levels are a bit high, so we pull them back a bit with the usual Saturday night test transmission and live stream on YouTube live stream. So if you want to see the video components of what we're about to transmit in audio only on ham radio, please do Google VK3AML 12 February 2022. That's VK3AML 12 February 2022, and the 12 and the 2022 in figures. It's 9:31. Tonight the first item on the program is to do with CSIRO and its predecessor organisation CSIR, which was the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, which goes back to the year 1916, I believe, but they started making films of their activities with their own film unit in the 1940s. So we're about to see a film of the development of their radiophysics lab specifically, and a little bit of the background to their other work. The radiophysics lab led to the first attempts at moonbounce, where CSIRO actually used Radio Australia's transmitting facilities to transmit pulses to the moon, I believe, on 16 metres, and were able to monitor the reflected pulses in Sydney, delayed by something like 2.5 seconds. And then we'll have a visit to Jeff VK3VJS, who I visited with a video camera on Thursday. A review of Paul Taylor, VK3HN's excellent YouTube channel, talking about his home-built 160 metre AM rig, and a field trip he made to Mount Feathertop some time ago. And finally we'll talk about band congestion as it varies around the world, specifically on 80 metres, and I've got some screen grabs of web-SDRs in Europe, in America and here, which make a very stark comparison. We don't know we're born in this country. We've got so much band space compared to Europe. Okay, without further ado, into film of the Council for Scientific Industrial Research, made initially in 1946. In 1949 they changed their name to CSIRO.
Distributed throughout Australia, the Council has established 26 main divisions and sections, together with a number of field stations. The work is Commonwealth-wide, and many of the divisions and sections have investigators working in various districts, cities and towns. The headquarters of the Council are located in Melbourne and comprise the main administrative offices, which include the Executive Committee and the Secretariat. In the field of primary industry, the Council has established the Division of Soils, which is housed at the Waite Institute, Adelaide, the Commonwealth Research Station at Mildura, Victoria, the Irrigation Research Station at Griffith, New South Wales, the Divisions of Plant Industry and Economic Entomology, and the Dixon Field Station at Canberra in the Federal Capital Territory. The Division of Fisheries at Cronulla, New South Wales, seen from the land and the sea. The Division of Food Preservation at Homebush, New South Wales. With a branch laboratory at Cannon Hill near Brisbane, Queensland. The Division of Animal Health and Production in Melbourne, with its associated McMaster Laboratory in Sydney, and McMaster Field Station at Badgerys Creek, and the Division of Biochemistry and General Nutrition in Adelaide. In the secondary industry field, there is a minerographic section housed in the Geology Department of the University of Melbourne and ore dressing laboratories in Melbourne, Adelaide and Kalgoorlie. Divisions of Industrial Chemistry and Aeronautics in Melbourne. The Division of Forest Products in Melbourne. The section of Tribophysics housed in the Chemistry Department of the University of Melbourne. The divisions of Metrology, Electrotechnology and Physics, housed in the National Standards Laboratory, Sydney. The Radio Research Board, located in the Electrical Engineering Department, University of Sydney, with branches at Canberra and Brisbane. The Radio Physics Laboratory in Sydney. The Building Materials Section and the Flax Laboratory at Hyatt, Victoria. And the Information Service, which is closely related to the head office of the Council and is occupying temporary premises in Melbourne. The head office library coordinates the work of all divisional libraries and maintains a central catalogue of holdings of all the libraries which are associated with the various divisions and sections, and of which these views are representative.
And you've been watching the... I got short-circuited there. You've been watching a description of CSIRO's early divisions, and now specifically the division of radiophysics, which took care of the events leading up to the development of Australian radio telescopes, radar, and weather forecasting by means of radar. The film outlines briefly the major investigations upon which the Division of Radiophysics, a unit of the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, is at present engaged. At present being 1949.
The Division of Radiophysics has its main headquarters within the grounds of Sydney University. Here are provided extensive laboratories and facilities for research and measurement, particularly at ultra-high frequencies, and in addition, facilities for the design and construction of experimental equipment required for this work. The laboratory was established just prior to the outbreak of World War II. Many special types of radar equipment were designed and developed to meet the special needs of the Allied forces in the Australian and the Southwest Pacific areas. At the end of the war, the picture changes. The division's program and its organization and facilities were reoriented towards the peacetime application of radar techniques and fundamental investigations in the newly developed region of ultra-high radio frequencies. The current activities of the division can best be shown by considering in turn the major researches which are included in its present program. It has been discovered that the sun and other celestial bodies emit radio waves, as well as light and heat. The stars are at very high temperature, and the atmosphere of our nearest star, the sun, is in a state of unceasing activity, as shown by these speeded-up records taken at Climax Observatory, Colorado, USA. This new branch of science, which is being actively pursued in Australia, and which is concerned with the study of radio waves from the sun and stars, is called radioastronomy, because it makes use of radio equipment rather than the more familiar telescope. Special aerials are used, covering frequencies from 60 to 30,000 megacycles per second. They vary in size and shape according to the frequency on which they are used and to the particular purpose for which they are designed. They are usually supported, like telescopes, on equatorial mountings, and are driven by motor so that they remain accurately pointed at the sun or star field being observed. The output from the receivers associated with them is recorded automatically on pen recorders. The sun, of course, is the subject of special study. The intensity of the solar noise, as it is called, increases when the sun is active, usually indicated by the presence of sunspots. And most of this enhanced radiation has been shown to come from the vicinity of the sunspots themselves. Sometimes the recorders show sudden increases in activity. These are called bursts, or when they are very great and of longer duration, outbursts. Now, do these bursts occur on all wavelengths? At Penrith Field Station, the characteristics of these particular signals from the sun are being studied over a range of frequencies. A special wideband rhombic aerial is used in conjunction with a receiver which 3 times per second tunes from 70 to 130 megacycles per second. A cathode ray tube, which can be photographed, automatically shows how the bursts vary in intensity. In this record, 70 megacycles appears on the left and 130 on the right. Although some of the aerials used have very narrow beams, this one, for example, only about 1 degree wide, this is not narrow enough to determine precisely the directions from which these radio waves are coming. Interference methods are therefore employed. In one method, 2 or more identical aerials, spaced an accurately known distance apart, are combined. This work is being done at a field station on the edge of a reservoir at Potts Hill. At Dover Heights, on a cliff site 250 feet above sea level, an alternative method is used, particularly for the discovery and identification of what are known as radio stars. For this purpose, the aerial is usually pointed at the horizon. As the point source of radio noise rises above the sea, the direct signals and those reflected from the flat surface of the sea produce a well-defined interference pattern at the receiver. By this means, some distant nebulae, for example the Crab Nebula, have been shown to be powerful sources of radio noise. As more sensitive equipment is being brought into use, more and more radio stars are being discovered. At least 20 are known at present, most of which do not coincide with any known visible objects in the sky. This is why they are referred to as radio stars. The moon gives rise to radio waves, but these are extremely weak, because the moon is at a very much lower temperature than the sun. They can be measured by using special aerials, and they reveal how the moon's temperature varies just below its surface. From this we know that the moon's disk is probably covered with a thin layer of volcanic ash. The moon can also act as a reflector for radio waves and allows us to study what happens to radio signals when they pass out and back through the complete depth of the Earth's atmosphere. Through the cooperation of the Department of Information and the Postmaster General's Department, special signals are sent out from Radio Australia, which is situated at Shepparton, Victoria. These are picked up at a receiving station at Hornsby near Sydney. Under suitable conditions and when the moon is exactly in the aerial beam, the signals can be picked up again after they've travelled to the moon and back. A group of quarter-second pulses is sent out every 6 seconds. They are recorded on a cathode ray tube and can be both seen and heard. The loud pips, of course, are the outgoing transmissions, and the weak ones, about 2.5 seconds later, radio echoes from the moon. Notice how the echoes vary in strength. Some of these variations arise as the signals travel through the Earth's outer atmosphere. Radar waves can be reflected or scattered by water drops, and so radar is sometimes used to detect approaching storms and to track their movement. This speeded-up record of the radar screen shows rainstorms forming and dispersing off the coast near Sydney. The laws of scattering of radio waves by water droplets are being investigated in the laboratory. Drops of known size are placed in a waveguide, and the amount of energy they reflect is measured. The echoes from raindrops in individual clouds are also being studied and are picked up by this aerial. The strength of the echo and the height within the cloud at which the reflection takes place is also measured.
This is VK3AML with the Saturday night test transmission. Please note that this film was made 73 years ago in 1949, and CSIRO had, as you see, already worked out the fundamentals of weather radar by then. It's interesting how much of this development actually went ahead in Australia very early on, and you'll see a bit more of Australian ingenuity as time goes on. A lot of the people involved with CSIRO at this stage had been demobbed from the services after the Second World War and were a new breed of scientific recruit to the organisation. Back to the 1949 film.
Independent measurements are also made of the size and number of drops in rain and in cloud. This is done by sending aloft a special microphone attached to a balloon. Raindrops impinging on this microphone modulate a carrier wave and are recorded by telemetering equipment in the mobile laboratory. In cooperation with the Aeronautical Research Laboratories, now of the Department of Supply and Development, model aircraft have been developed whose flight can be controlled by radio.
Now, on this subject, I'll just chip in to say that these model aircraft were actually developed by Gil Miles, an old friend of mine who died in 1981, born in 1904. He had been the engineer of the very first experimental television broadcasts in Australia through the channel of 3UZ in Melbourne on medium wave back in January 1929, but at this stage he got into the fundamental and applied research by building model airplanes that could go up very high, higher than most normal planes, quite large dihedral angle on them, as you'll see, and radio back to Earth the conditions of the stratosphere. Remember, at this time jet aircraft were being developed, and it was a new field that needed investigation, upper atmosphere research. Back to Gil Miles' radio-controlled models.
Flying models such as these are able to be directed from the ground and carry instruments whose readings are radioed back to the ground. These models have useful applications not only to meteorological investigations, but also to aeronautical research. The division is studying the physical conditions which exist within clouds and the formation of rain both by natural and artificial means. These speeded up records show clouds forming and dispersing. Under suitable conditions, rain may be precipitated by treating clouds with various substances. The material most often used is solid carbon dioxide, commonly known as dry ice. The dry ice is first broken up into small pieces and loaded into a plane. The Royal Australian Air Force is cooperating by providing flying facilities for this work. The aircraft carries a downward-looking radar, which is used to reveal whether rain forms within the cloud after seeding. Flights are made when conditions for the formation of cloud are favorable. The plane takes off and makes for the nearest suitable cloud area. Physical conditions in the air at various heights are recorded, and when the cloud to be treated has been reached, it is first photographed from various aspects. The aircraft then circles above the cloud, using the radar to check that it does not already contain raindrops. When all preparations have been made, the dry ice is placed in the chute, and the aircraft makes a run at the cloud, where it drops the dry ice at a predetermined spot. The action of the dry ice is to freeze the cloud droplets in its path, and so form myriads of tiny ice crystals, which under favorable conditions grow rapidly in size and finally melt to form raindrops. The aircraft remains above the cloud to check the results. The radar in the aircraft shows rain developing and allows the process to be followed and recorded as the raindrops form and fall through the cloud which has been treated. Deep cumulus clouds, whose tops are much colder than freezing, are most likely to produce artificial rain in this way. In many cases, it has been shown that the cloud seeded with dry ice rained soon after, while other similar clouds in the vicinity did not. The use of modern electronic and high-speed relay devices can effect a great saving in the mathematical work arising in physical and other researches. For its own special needs, the Division of Radiophysics is developing an electronic computer.
And it was called CSIRAC after CSIRO, and a section of that computer, preserved and working, is now with the Museum of Victoria. This is VK3AML testing.
In a computer of this type, many hundreds of relays and electronic valves are used. Mercury delay lines are used as the memory unit for the storage of numbers which can be extracted automatically when required. The machine receives its instructions and supplies its answers on punched cards and is used in conjunction with standard Hollerith punched card equipment. A number of radar aids to aircraft navigation and airport control have been developed by the division. Distance measuring equipment and multiple track range are two of these. These consist of separate airborne units and radio beacons on the ground. Distance measuring equipment has been adopted for use throughout Australia by the Department of Civil Aviation. It provides a pilot with a continuous indication of his distance in miles to selected points along his route. These points are identified by code on a flashing neon lamp. The Australian multiple track range is a track guidance system for use along air routes and at airports. It provides a number of tracks radiating from an airport from which a pilot may select the particular track along which he wishes to fly. An indicator tells him when he has reached this track, and a sensitive meter on his dashboard then takes over and allows him to follow that track accurately. The aids to airport control, which have been developed by the division, include a radar set installed on the airport at Mascot, Sydney. This provides the traffic controller with a visual plot of all aircraft within a range of 20 miles. Another larger radar is situated at a convenient site away from the vicinity of the aerodrome. Information from this set is relayed by radio link to the control tower at Mascot. This provides the controller with a PPI picture showing aircraft up to a distance of over 100 miles. Because of the operational ceilings likely to be in common use with jet-engined aircraft, it is important to know the structure of winds at heights above 30,000 feet. The division is using radar methods to track balloons to great heights. A special silver-coated balloon, which reflects the radar waves, is first inflated inside a larger balloon. This larger balloon provides a high initial rate of ascent. When the balloon is released, it is followed and plotted with a theodolite, as it is not very discernible on the radar screen at such close distances. When it is beyond the range of the theodolite, the high-power radar set takes over, and the echo of the balloon is observed on the radar screen until it finally bursts, sometimes at a height of 20 miles or more above the Earth's surface. As a result of these experiments, it has been found that the wind reaches speeds of up to 150 miles an hour at heights of 40,000 feet and above. Information of importance to future stratosphere flying.
This brief survey illustrates the current activities of the Radiophysics Laboratory in 1949. They may be summarised as fundamental studies of radio frequency radiation which reaches us from the Sun and the galaxy, the use of radar methods and the study of natural and artificial rain formation, electronic methods for solving mathematical problems, and the development of radio and radar methods of navigation. The End, produced by the Information Service Department of CSIRO, 1949. Thus ends the historical part of our transmission. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima with the usual Saturday night transmission. I might mention it's been quite a week of acquisition of equipment, and those of you who are watching the live stream, which you can dial up by googling VK3AML 12 February 2022. Those of you who are watching will see the reel of 15 metres worth of LL400 coax. It's a very low loss coax, suitable for use at 432 megs or even above. And if I can hold this up to the camera very accurately, hopefully, you'll see that the centre conductor is a single wire, aluminium, and it's copper coated. The outer, the braid, is double braid, the normal braid of course, but underneath that aluminium coating on foam. So this is a particularly low loss coax, LL400 it's called. Anyway, I needed to get some special connectors for this LL400 because the centre conductor frequently won't fit normal PL259 or N connectors. So for that I had to go to Jaycar on Thursday this week, and I'll just bring up the video of this to show you the connectors concerned. Here we go, that's a PL259 connector with the very large centre hole, rather larger than RG213 centre conductor on the LL400. So that's the special PL259 connector for one end, and the other end N connector, spring-loaded N connector, specially designed also for LL400, not cheap. So I had to get some sealant to seal these conductors, these plugs to the cable. Had to go to Jaycar, and the easiest one for me to get to was Springvale, as you see on this near Spaghetti Junction, as Jeff VK3VJS calls this terribly tangled intersection. And there's Jaycar. Watch me trip over the culvert as I go into the shop. This is not an advertisement, by the way, because the reel of self-sealing tape I had to get was rather expensive. I was salivating, however, over some of the lithium deep cycle batteries, expensive though they were. Very handy for portable operation. And that's the self-fusing tape, butyl based, never quite dries out. It's a bit like plasticine in consistency, about somewhere between 1 millimetre and 2 millimetres thick, and you have to bind it around and then sort of mould it onto the plug. And it wasn't cheap. $25 for a reel of tape. I was a little bit staggered. So we staggered off further south to visit Jeff VK3VJS in Springvale, and you can see his antennas from several streets away. See the forest of them there. So let's visit VK3VJS in his natural surroundings. So if you give us a description of the selection up here.
Well, here we have a Kenwood dual mode FM and sideband transceiver.
Right.
We have here an ICOM IC7300 on 7175.
Yep.
With a band scope. We have a Dick Smith oscilloscope,
right.
A Goodwill frequency counter, Heathkit, a pan adapter and modulation monitor.
Yep.
Down here we have a Codan 8528.
So you've got all the frequencies covered, basically.
Yeah, another Kenwood UHF transceiver.
Mm.
And down here we have an ASDEN 10 metre FM.
Ah.
At the moment it's on a 29.2, which is the Australian cooling channel.
And you'd be getting quite a bit of traffic on there with the present atmospheric conditions,
no,
I guess.
it's not working properly.
Oh, okay.
Not working properly.
Okay.
It needs attention.
Right.
And also, what else? A scanner over there, a leader signal generator.
Right. And
Just
behind
the
you,
usual.
FRG 7700 and a few other bits and pieces.
What's going on here? Oh, that's not working properly. You should be getting Moorabbin. Or have they turned it off? Oh.
On 10 megs?
No, on 398 kilohertz.
Oh, okay.
It's not working.
It looks like you're switched to 10.398 from where I'm standing.
No, just ignore the 10. Don't
Ah,
worry about that. It's going
okay.
through a converter.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
I don't like that. It's not on.
Either that or the antenna's dropped out. I'll have to try that when I get
noises
home.
earlier on today, so maybe there's some problem at Moorabbin.
Right,
But
gotcha.
it's not there.
Okay.
It's not there. I don't have any other receiver around here that will pick it up.
And we've got a rogues gallery of QSL cards up the wall here. Any in particular you remember, Jeff, that are of particular note? The Great Reba Museum.
Oh,
Hobart.
look, they're all memorable, a whole lot.
That's
really?
a 1960s Voice of America card, I think.
Yes, yes. VNG
Lyndhurst.
on 4.5,
7.5 and 12.
megahertz.
Yep.
Beep, beep. There was one here of,
Oh, there's a historic one. Radio Australia, which is no more.
yeah, shame, 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 and especially the Northern Territory. shortwave service. I'd like to get the senators who had the deciding vote, and I would horsewhip them out of Canberra.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, if you lived up there in the Northern Territory and you depended on that service for the ABC, and all of a sudden the plug was pulled.
I did notice there was a YouTube clip of some bloke actually taking a sledgehammer to an HF radio outside the thing as a protest the day they closed it.
Now, the ABC has received a very generous grant, if you've seen on the news.
No?
Surely they can reopen those stations.
Well, let's hope so.
Alice Springs, Tennants Creek and Catherine.
Okay.
Get them back on air again.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for that, Jeff. No, what's that off?
It's a fan, electric fan.
Oh, right, so it's generating power.
No.
No?
Play. Look at it go.
Oh, okay.
So never throw out a good electric fan.
Okay, what are the other antennas up there?
27 megs.
That's 27 megs on the left. And right above us here looks like UHF something or other.
No, it's the dual band diamond,
Okay.
which is broken.
We've got a few others around here too.
Yeah, scanners, TV.
And a disc cone on the right.
Yeah, general UHF, VHF.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got another antenna to put up here if I ever get that 10 metre Aston going.
Right. Okay.
If I don't get it going, well, he owes me another $50.
Jeff Silvester, VK3VJS, and I hope that does your duty, Jeff. Thank you very much for your hospitality on the day. I hope it's the first of many. With regard to the visit to Jeff, something interesting turned up. He handed me a little box as I left, and he said, "Don't open this till you get home." And I was very surprised at the content. It's a little jewel, almost 100 years old. And I'll see if I can get this in focus. This is a 1920s photo cell, one of the very first generations of photoelectric cells, photoemissive cells, and in those days, to get the best results, they used potassium as the photocathode material, an alkali metal cell they used to call them. It has a number there, I think you can read the number 2172, made by GEC. And this probably started its life in a talking picture projector, one of those projectors that came from America or England in 1929 to give Melbourne its first view of talking pictures. But you very rarely see these. The only time I've ever seen one before was in the pages of a very early book on television which suggested using these as pickups behind a mechanical scanner. So thank you very much for that, Jeff. That'll be treasured and handed on to some suitable museum in the event of my demise, provided Prue doesn't call a skip first. So that was very much appreciated. Thank you, Jeff 3VJS. Now, continuing last week's theme of reviewing excellent ham radio YouTube channels, I can only recommend that you look up a channel that's called Paul Taylor VK3HN. That's VK3 Hotel November. But the name of the channel again, Paul, P-A-U-L, Taylor, T-A-Y-L-O-R, VK3HN. And Paul is an excellent constructor of home-built equipment, has built some very fancy gear. So I'll introduce him here, talking about a complete Class D, high-efficiency, 160 metre AM transmitter that he's built. And then he'll take you on one of his field trips with a small home-built radio to the top of Mount Feathertop. Paul Taylor, VK3HN, and an excellent channel to look up.
Paul here, VK3HN. I'll give you a guided tour of this homebrew 200 watt Class D pulse width modulated AM transmitter for 160 metres. Let's start with the VFO. This is a completely conventional Arduino Nano and SI5351 phase locked loop arrangement. The board is mounted right behind the front panel. It's a little bit difficult for me to get the camera in there, but there you can see the Nano and the SI5351 board with a buffer underneath it and some power regulation. This board is the transmitter. It's a complete pulse width modulator. These two FETs here, which are RFP260s, and a power diode between them, does the pulse width modulation. And these four FETs here are the RF switching stage, power output stage, capable of a good 100 watts, quite conservatively rated. So operating in parallel, there's a second RF power module, and that's hanging off this second heatsink, and that's just simply the same RF power module with four switching FETs and an IXD614 driver that is driven by the same clock. So they're in phase, they're both pushing and pulling at the same time, and both RF switching stages or RF power stages are driven by the same pulse width modulator on the left-hand board. So the two RF power outputs are combined in this RF power combiner board here. The transformer on the right does the power combining, and the transformer on the left is a tapped single winding auto transformer to transform a 25 ohm impedance of the power combining transformer up to 50 ohms. Details of this from W8JI. Output of the power combiner is into a conventional W3NQN low pass filter. So from the mic socket via a gain control straight into a very conventional microphone amplifier. That's a field effect transistor on the microphone input, and a TL071 op amp delivers about 1 volt to 2 volts peak to peak into the pulse width modulator. So now over to the beast of a power supply. Well, I call it a beast because it's the biggest power supply I've ever built. So easily capable of 500 watts, probably more. This was a industry piece that I picked up from a disposal store a few years back, and I wound a 100 volt secondary with taps. So the secondary is tapped at every 10 volts down to 60 volts, so 100 down to 60 volts here, which allows me just to step up the power, the AC power, into the regulator. This board is the rectifier. It's mounted underneath and is flush with the bottom of the chassis, and the capacitor bank, 9,000 microfarads at 250 volts. Then this board running along here is a switching regulator. So it works exactly like a conventional switching circuit. The PWM chip is hard to see, because the board is mounted vertically, but it's actually right there, and that's a TL598. That drives this IC here, which is the high side of a IR2110 into a switching FET there. So the regulator can take 100 volts DC in and provide 0 to 80 or 90 volts fully regulated, fully variable on its output. And over here on the side here, we've got a soft starter just to alleviate any switch on thump. So the circuits for the whole transmitter are available on my blog. Just Google VK3AML and you'll find it. Well, that was slightly longer than a minute. Hopefully you're still with us. Let's see how it goes on air. VK3AML. Hello. VK3AML. VK3 Hotel November.
Good morning, Paul. You're a big signal out here at that zone this morning.
Good morning, Laurie. Well, that's good news because the transmitter has come together.
Paul, I've heard your transmission sounds terrific, nice and crisp, telephonic sort of. That's not a criticism. It's a good thing on this band. Anyway, let's hear more about your adventures with that project. VK3 Hotel November, VK3 X-ray uniform.
Good morning, VK3XU in the group, VK3HN. It's a pair of H-bridge modules and pulse width modulation, and running about 100 watts, a carrier, and on about a 60 volt rail, about 2 amps steady, kicking up to 2¼ amps.
Okay, Paul. Yes, I didn't comment on your transmission earlier on my previous transmission. Well, let me say that it's robust. It's very, very good. You're peaking up to about 21 dB over 9, which is what Laurie does at the best of times. And the modulation is superb. Only one really picky minor comment, and that is the modulation is a little bit spitty. Possibly something to do with your microphone or how close you are to the microphone, but that's being really, really picky. Nothing to do with your transmitter. It's going like a rocket.
Good morning to everyone from Death Valley this morning, where it was absolutely freezing, and I do mean freezing. Paul, good to hear you on, and that set's working quite well indeed. You're a very strong signal here in Death Valley, and good to hear that your efficiencies and everything as they should be. And as I said before, when you were having those problems, I suspected it was the drive to that regulator transistor.
Paul, your transmitter sounds quite nice over here, that's for sure. Slurry said it sounds like you've got it going just about right. Good morning everyone, enjoy your day, I should be here tomorrow. VK3 Hotel November, VK3 X-ray uniform.
VK3XU, VK3 Hotel November. Very good, all well copied, and thanks for all the comments. It's been fun to call in today. Just a few quick comments. I hadn't realised the exclusivity, but that's very likely to be the case for a number of their product ranges. So that's an informative observation. We'll keep it moving. I'm delighted to be calling in this morning on this homebrew transmitter project. It's taken me 6 months. It's all running cool, touch wood. Hopefully there won't be any more smoke, and there'll be many more coffee break QSOs and other QSOs on 160 metres AM to come. VK3HK with the group VK3HN. 7-3s, good morning all.
VK3HN, Paul VK3HN's YouTube channel with thanks to Laurie 3SJ, and see him on VK3HN WordPress. Now let's follow Paul Taylor on a trip up Mount Feathertop using his own homebrew 40 metre transmitter, the Razorback Trail. Looks a little on the hairy side, doesn't it? Particularly in a high wind it would be. He camped at Federation Hut, more than 1,700 metres above sea level, obviously in summer with quite a few campers there. Sunday 07:30, ice cold pure spring water. Let's listen to it trickle. Ah yes, ham radio is more than just speech. Mount Feathertop summit, the view, and if you dial up VK3AML 12th February 2022, you should get the visuals that go with the audio that we're transmitting at the moment. There's Paul's 40 metre antenna on top of Mount Feathertop. He's tuning around 7 megahertz. homebrew QRP SSP CW transceiver.
Yeah, good on you there, John. Good to hear you again. And like John said, it's been a long time.
A CQ Soda, VK3HN, VK3 Hotel November, Feathertop.
Victor Kilo 5, Charlie Zulu. Yeah, good morning. You're about 5x4, over. Roger that, no worries. Thanks very much. Good luck. VK3HN, VK5CZ73.
VK3 Hotel November, VK3 Sierra Quebec.
He called you in, Jeff.
Yeah, VK3HN Portable, VK3 Sierra Quebec. You're not very strong. Readability 3, strength 1, 31, 31, 31, 31. Over.
Oh, VK7FRJJ. Yeah, no problem, mate. 57 here, 5 and 7's your report, mate. Very good morning from near Hobart. Name is Rod. Radio Ocean Delta, over.
And you can tell from that the little home-built rig, 40 metres, was working very well on top of Mount Feathertop. Back to the video.
Yeah, VK3HN Portable. Well, better you than me. Hope the weather's fine. It's windy as hell down here, so hope you got a nice day up there, mate. Not too hot, not too cold, not too much wind. But anyway, that's the best I can hope for you. But you're doing a good job, mate. 5 and 7, little QS Baker. Very good morning to you. Thanks for being there, Abbott. All the very best to you, and thanks for your courtesy being out there doing the hard yards, Abbott.
A shot of some runners going down the Razorback track. VK3IO. VK3BYD. .051 megahertz, hearing K3Y/6 Tony in California and K6ELQ. He also contacted ZL1BYZ 20 metres CW 579 report. And some more people doing the track up Mount Feathertop, including people who are running up there. Well, that's our coverage of Paul Taylor, VK3HN's channel. I thoroughly recommend that you have a look at it. That's one of dozens of clips that Paul has produced in depth. And so look for Paul Taylor VK3HN as a phrase. Google that and you'll find his YouTube channel. Paul's based in Eltham, which is probably why he gets 3XU so well. I'll now draw your attention to a little something that I was able to record off web-SDRs in various continents, and I've got to know over the last few years where to dial up the SDRs with the best antennas and the quietest locations to give you an idea of how much traffic there is on different bands in different parts of the world. Well, I took these recordings, and please, if you can dial my visuals on VK3AML 12 February 2022, you will see what I'm talking about. You're about to see some waterfall displays from various web-SDRs, shot in video in movement. 80 metre band congestion in Europe from a web-SDR in North Wales. This video was shot at 6:58 local time in Wales, approximately the peak usage time for 80 metres for Europe. The band was absolutely full from 3.55 to 3.8 megs, and there you see it, wall-to-wall signals, butt jointed against each other and even on top of each other. There's an AM signal with a carrier on 3.6 megs. There's some WSJT on the far left. But oh brother, we never see conditions like this in Australia. It's harder to get a conversation on 80 metres. But over there, getting rid of conversations is the hard part. Now the 80 metre ham band congestion in USA from a web-SDR near San Francisco. The video was shot around 6:30 p.m. California time, near the peak usage time for USA in winter. The band was heavily used from 3.55 to 4 megs, but certainly not as cluttered as Europe. The thing is that America's 230-odd million citizens are spread across a much larger area. So consequently, the congestion from any one part of the continental USA is not all that great. There's quite a bit of crowding, though, from 3.8 to 4 megs, their so-called 75 metre band, where most of the phone activity goes on. And as you'll see, there's not much below 3.8. The 80 metre ham band in Australia. This is from the web-SDR 80 kilometres north of Adelaide, VK3AML. Was shot around 9 p.m. Adelaide time, which is near the peak usage time of 80 metres for Australia in summer. The band is actually very sparsely used, in spite of what people tell you about crowding. This is peak hour on 80 metres in Australia, and look how much space is available. It's unbelievable. Anybody who says that space is limited on 80 metres should look at this. There's virtually nothing below 3.55 megs. There's WSJT on about 3.57 and one strong signal on 3.59. The rest of them are fairly weak signals, there are only about 4 of them, and a couple of fax services, one in Korea, one in Japan. There is, on the right, you'll see a cloudy patch of light colour. That is the over-the-horizon radar, which goes from 3.66 to about 3.68 megs, or it did on this night. Sometimes that can be a problem with using the upper part of 80 metres. And of course on the extreme right, Dural, the Morse practice transmission near 3.7 megs. So how does that compare with Europe? We should think ourselves extremely lucky to live in a country where there is space. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. Speaking about space, let's have a look now at Australian analogue and French digital slow scan television as received off various web-SDRs. It's just as easy to demodulate pictures off web-SDRs as it is from your own receiver, perhaps even more so, because with web-SDRs you can regulate infinitely the receive video bandwidth to just accommodate the width of an SSTV signal. So going over to that video, let's have a look first of all at Australian transmissions. This is VK7BO's SSTV on 14230, received at the VK5ARG website. Very much speeded up just so that we can get through the pictures more quickly. Analog SSTV is actually a fairly narrow band system. The signal only extends from 1.1 kilohertz to about 2.2 or 2.3. And there's an example of VK7 coming through with excellent propagation conditions to South Australia. Single hop probably. VK7BO Allen at Riverside near Launceston in Tasmania. Distance may be 600 kilometres, maybe 700. And another example of Allen's work. The pictures are excellent, but compared to digital slow scan, they're fairly low in definition, no more than 240 or 320p. With digital, you can go much, much higher in definition, as you will see. VK7BO, as received in South Australia. Now, French SSTV and digital SSTV group, 3730 kHz for analog, 3733 kHz for digital, and the video sped up for display. This was received off a Kiwi SDR in Le Havre in France. And there's F4ETT's transmission on the, I think it's PD180 mode. Clear enough, but the sig-to-noise ratio leaves a bit to be desired, as you can see. I only got about 3/4 of the picture. Another example on 3730. It looks like F5BDK, a French transmission in that 3-minute mode. I think PD 240. And we see a chap looking through a telescope at the moon. But again, with all of the noise of 80 metres, in spite of narrowing down the web-SDR to accommodate only the picture. So how does it compare with digital slow-scan television? Well, the French actually do digital SSTV. About 5:30 p.m. Melbourne time, if you tune in on a French web-SDR, you'll get this. This is sped up by a factor of about 4. This is what's called EasyPal hybrid. It's a bit of a cheat system, really. What they transmit in the 64 subcarriers, digitally sent, is a URL to the distant computer, which then looks into an internet cache to download the picture. So it's just a transmission directing to the picture storage rather than actually transmitting the picture over the air. So any picture of any size can be transmitted this way. Pictures of the F6 F4MXX radio club, and a series of other rather attractive pictures being sent over 80 metres. The quality, needless to say, leaves analogue for dead. There are a series of reports of the various stations involved with that net. You'll also notice that the waterfall has printed information on it. That's something that you can do with the so-called EasyPal software. You can actually print your supporting information on the waterfall, which shows up on the EasyPal software box on the right, as well as on the waterfall on HF. But because this is lower sideband, the waterfall appears on the HF receiver in mirror image. If it was upper sideband, the waterfall would be the right way round. Series of demonstration pictures being sent by the French slow scan group, and these you can pick up any night on the Le Havre web-SDR or on the very good one that's in North Wales. One of my forthcoming Saturday night sessions, I'll talk about the various really good web-SDRs. There are an awful lot of bad ones with noisy locations or antennas that are probably 6 inches of wire, but the really good ones are notable. Here in Melbourne, Paul 3KHZ runs a very good web-SDR in Croydon. These are just a series of test transmissions being transmitted by the French by what's called EasyPal hybrid. That is EasyPal integrated with the interweb. 29th of March 1967, France launched its first nuclear submarine. And as you can see from the shortness of these transmissions, you can pack a lot more photos into a given time in transmitting. You might see that I had to relaunch EasyPal there because the computer is downloading from cache. My Windows Defender software sometimes recognises it as a virus being downloaded and stops EasyPal. So I just relaunch and go on. Bit annoying. I've tried to stop the virus software from recognising or doing anything to EasyPal, but it seems to circumvent my control. Interesting point. If you see the diagonal waves, the lines across the EasyPal stream, that's selective fade, and it's very interesting to watch what it does to the frequency response of any signal that's transmitted. Somebody tuning up, me relaunching EasyPal. And F5UGS in France transmitting random pictures of his trips through the Sahara Desert. These guys usually pick a subject, and most of them are photographic enthusiasts. Their work is frequently highly impressive. They're mostly radio hams who are inclined to visual expression. There are such people. I didn't decode that last one, it was a bit weak. This one from F4MXX was easy to decode. There's a footpath that must have been laid by a council working under multiple directions. They have them in France too. And you can read the reports that they're giving in the waterfall. Thanks for report, etc., etc. F4EKQ's dog. This, of course, could go on and on. I'll only run another 30 seconds or so of this. But this gives you some idea of the pictures that are transmitted every day in France. The Americans haven't taken up digital slow scan too much at all. I heard a local amateur claiming that they had. Of course, these days with web-SDRs you can very easily check that for yourself. And I found that not to be the case. It's very rare that you find digital slow scan being used in America. But in France particularly, and in England, you'll see it frequently on around 3733 as this transmission was being done, or 3736 kilohertz, which is within the 80 metre band for both France and Britain. Again, those frequencies, if you're dialing up a European-based web-SDR, 3733 or 3736 kilohertz. I thought I'd tore a putty tat. So you've been watching for the last 8 minutes examples of French digital slow scan, as well as slow scan from VK7BO. Well, I see we've got about 20 minutes left before we come to the witching hour of 11 o'clock, when I open it up for conversations on 147.475. So in the meantime, a slightly more modern film than the early ones done by CSIRO, one of a tour of the PARKES Radiotelescope, one of the largest such instruments in the world and the descendant instrument of all those early radiophysics experiments that were being done in Sydney in 1949. So this is a tour of the radiotelescope at PARKES, in which you're conducted around by the late Dr. John Abels, who was the American director of the radio telescope and its upgrades, particularly through the 1980s and early 1990s. But this is John Abels with the PARKES Radiotelescope in 1979. a tour of the Parkes Radiotelescope with Dr. John Abels. A view of the dish. And Dr. Abels driving in.
Well, here we are, the Parkes Radiotelescope. Today, one of the foremost instruments in the world for radioastronomy. It's a big dish, 64 meters in diameter, and it can turn and tilt to scan the entire sky. With it tipped over to the ground like it is now, we can step right aboard. Come with me and I'll show you how it works. Okay, Bob, take the telescope to the zenith. The radio waves from space, striking the surface of the big dish here, are reflected and focused to a spot directly over my head. There's the aerial cabin, where the sensitive receiving gear is placed.
I particularly like the tiny little lift they have up to the prime focus observing point, which you see here. And this is the hut at the prime focus.
Well, here we are on the focal platform itself. Below us, there's nothing but the big dish itself. The radio waves are focused right to this platform. I'm looking onto the dish, and I know full well that the radio waves from distant galaxies, and quasars, and pulsars are being focused right into my face, but I don't feel a thing. The reason is that these waves are extraordinarily weak, and that's what we need this receiver for. It's a very sensitive amplifier, which amplifies the signal about 1,000,000 times. The signal passes through a hole, not the one I'm looking through, but a hole here in the center, and up through these pipes and into the receiver. From there, it's sent down cables to the radio room, which is in the tower supporting the dish itself below us. We're back on the ground again, just outside the supporting tower of the telescope. It has 3 levels, but we'll pick up our radio signal on the first floor. We're now on the first floor of the supporting tower of the telescope. And this room, which is often called the radio room, is filled with equipment to further amplify the weak signal that was sent down by the cable from the aerial cabin. The signal, which was already amplified by 1,000,000 times in the aerial cabin, is increased in strength again 1,000,000 times. And finally, 1,000,000 times stronger than when it came from space into the telescope, is ready to be sent to the control room above us for final recording and analysis. Now, in the control room, the signal generally is passed first to this machine. The purpose of this machine is to break the radio signal into its component parts, very much like a prism breaks white light into its colors. And this machine works with our digital computer. The digital computer finally presents the result as a graph. And here's the digital computer, and in front of it, the radio astronomer. These days, to be a radio astronomer often means that you have to be a computer operator as well. How's it going, Alan?
Oh, we've got a possible detection on 273, but I think we'll have to leave it for today. I think we'll go over to 2142. Frank, could we go to 2142 minus 75, please? Okay.
And that was the astronomer telling our telescope driver to move the telescope to the next source in the sky that he wishes to observe.
This is VNG, Lyndhurst, Victoria, Australia, 4.5, 7.5, for trial.
You're on source, Alan.
The observations of the heavens with the radio telescope continue night and day. And the information collected, appearing mostly as graphs, charts, tables, flows out continuously. But eventually, it is in the mind of the radio astronomer himself that the picture of the universe must form. The radio telescope serves only to extend the senses of man deeper into the heavens to find out how it works and what our place is in it.
What do you reckon, Paul? I think we should do 0922 minus 51 with a 10-second integration time, no? Yes, but you have to reload the tape again. Yeah,
okay. The dish. The CSIRO's own version of a tour of the dish, not the fictional version that we saw in the theatres about 20 years ago. This was filmed in 1979 by the CSIRO's own film unit. They actually did have one at that stage. This is VK3, Alpha Mike Lima. Well, to take us up to 11 o'clock and the QSO part of the session, I thought I'd play back a recording made on Thursday of the EasyPal net that we have, conducted on this occasion by VK3FTZD, Tim, and with about 5 or 6 other participants. We meet every Thursday with digital slow scan gear, which is all freeware, on the VK3AML repeater, 146.7 with a 91.5 Hz access tone up at Ferny Creek. And with the permission of the repeater owner, who is Amateur Radio Victoria, we weekly have these sessions, 2 hours from 9 p.m. every Thursday night. And we're mostly just people who are interested in conveying pictures. We have a story to tell with the picture. Indeed, you will hear us telling those stories when I play you back just a sample of the first 15 or 20 minutes worth of our Thursday net. Here it is, as recorded off VK3RML on Thursday, with Tim as the net controller. The DSSTV net, EasyPal.
It is time for the EasyPal net. The EasyPal net is a sanctioned activity by the repeater owner operator Amateur Radio Victoria, and we thank them for allowing us to use the repeater for our hobby. We meet on this repeater every 9 p.m. or every Thursday evening at 9 p.m. For our EasyPal images. We transmit and receive images using the slow scan imaging software called EasyPal. It's a digital format and allows for a much detailed image quality without the static you get from the analog methods. We also have a Facebook page, so feel free to jump on that. We try to keep it up to date with the images sent through from the night. Sometimes we get a little bit behind, but we do try to keep it relatively up to date. Okay, it appears that is all for the start of the net tonight. So we'll pass it over to Chris VK3AML. How are you? How's your week been? And we're ready for your first image when you are.
No worries, Tim. And I think it's John and Chris. Just jotting that down. I'm recording in video off the screen grabs tonight's session with the idea of editing it down and running it as part of my Saturday night session, just to show people what EasyPal's like, with pertinent bits left in and the slow bits left out. So to start the night off, this is a picture taken outside the meeting venue of the Sherbrooke Amateur Radio Club on Monday night, with the porcupine cars. Only amateur radio operators will understand what I mean by that. The porcupine cars lined up outside the church hall in which we meet. VK3AML with an EasyPal pick on the drop of the repeater. That is the waterfall of my call sign, VK3AML, and then you hear the 64 subcarrier stream, and then the picture comes up. This is actually transmitted holus bolus on the radio, not the hybrid version that uses internet.
VK3AML, VK3FTZD and the EasyPal net. Full decode on that at 18 dB. VK3AML, Chris, had a description on this image when you're ready.
Yeah, well, this is around the back of the church hall in Baronia, in which the Sherbrooke Amateur Radio Club meets first Monday of each month, about 7 p.m. The central car there, the big one with the custom built back on it, the ute, is Jim VK3AMN's vehicle, which he's taken into Central Australia on many occasions. He was tied up with national parks and the tracking of various types of bird in his working life, and now in his retirement he revels in camping. So he's kind of the focus of the camping aspects of the group. The others, I'm not sure who belongs to which car. I think the car on the left of his is Peter VK3ACZ's, the silver one. There were 3 other cars parked on the car park on the other side, so there was a total of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, would have been 11 cars with about maybe 15 blokes there, and a couple came by public transport, including me. Anyway, Sherbrooke Amateur Radio Club, VK3FTZD, VK3AML.
Thanks there, Chris. Excellent image. Okay, we are over to VK3/M0PTV. How's your week been? How are you? And we're ready for your first image for the night when you are.
VK3/M0PTV. Survived another week, that's all I can say, Tim. It's been, had its ups and downs, but I'm still here. Been trying to do some work, did some gardening, did my regular routine that I'm here for. And it was good to defocus myself on some other things, but other than that, I sort of look forward to a bit of radio and hope to get maybe possibly some HF up and running once I get my antennas up. So yep, I'm ready for the next image. Hopefully all the hardware is working. I've adjusted my levels slightly from last week's recommendation, so I dropped it a little bit, so hopefully my signal to noise will be a little bit better. So the drop of the repeater, here we go.
And you'll see his call sign forms in the waterfall on the left. And then the 64 subcarriers all simultaneously FM'd with matrix modulation, so if one part of the signal is lost, another part can take its place. There's a redundancy built in. And error correction of the Reed-Solomon type. I'd obviously previously been receiving French signals on the same software. It'll disappear once his picture comes through, which takes about 60 seconds. He's actually transmitting the whole picture on those multiple subcarriers. We're not using the internet for the VHF contact each week. We transmit a picture. It wouldn't matter if you're in the middle of Bass Strait. You could still receive the pictures off this stream. This is VK3AML with a replay of part of the EasyPal digital slow scan net from Thursday evening, 9 p.m. on 3RML. And at any moment now the image should come up. I'm looking at the... There we go. A piece of RF gear from M0PTV, who's currently visiting Australia. As you can see, he's got himself a VK call. And there's his call on the waterfall.
VK3-M0PTV, this is the VK3FTZD and the EasyPal net. That's weird. The ID says CUF M0PTV. That's weird. That looks... Is that a power injector maybe? I don't know. Or is it an active... I'm not 100% sure. VK-M0PTV. Please explain. I'm very curious on this one.
VK3-M0PTV. I thought I'd start with a little bit of a techie image today. This is actually a well, it's an RF module, okay? It's manufactured by NXP, which is a division of Philips. They make RF power transistors, quite a lot of hardware that's used in UHF, VHF, telecommunications, even HF, a lot of the LD MOS devices. So this is based on an MRF 101, which is can be driven until about 110, 120 watts. It's very efficient at 80%. And it's a demonstrator design. Essentially, there's a little printed circuit board that you can see with the two SMA connectors. You get two of the transistors, right? So you've got both the N and P variants, and no components. And the whole kit, when I bought it, cost about $50. Which is extremely great value because just the SMAs that you can imagine and the little printed circuit board and the mounting bracket will probably cost you that much just to make it yourself. Not to mention the transistors on their own are about $30 a piece, so you get two of them, so that already pays for the board. So it was excellent value, and I actually made a little module. It was, let's have a look, the one that I did was, I was trying to use it for HF, and I think I tuned it up for about, it was in the 11 meter band. The thing is that those little inductors, the little coils, they're already pre-manufactured, and you can buy these coils for the various values. So the only thing that differs for depending what frequency band you want to operate it on are the coils and a couple of surface mount capacitors.
And just interrupting there, in 3 minutes' time, this is now 10:57, I'll be opening it up for a QSO. VK3AML replaying last Thursday's EasyPal digital slow scan net from the VK3RML repeater, with permission, I might add.
So it's essentially a generic design. Now, obviously, you need a bandpass filter at the end of it. That will work quite well, but there will be some harmonics as well, so you want to eliminate that if you're going to be using it on air. But yeah, I just couldn't resist it. I got this module maybe 2 years ago now. I think that's probably still available. I bought it from Mouse Electronics. If you know about them, you can probably find them. I don't know if they still do these modules, but there is a PDF file that tells you all the component values for the various frequencies and designs. So it's a good little module. Now, the whole idea of the base plate is that you screw this on to a big slab of copper, because obviously that will be dissipating over 100 watts. So that's basically what it is. Hope you guys find it interesting. VK3/M0BTV back to VK3FTZD.
And this is VK3AML with the regular Saturday night test transmission, followed by, well, I suppose you'd call it a callback. Okay, it's just coming up to 10:59. We'll see who's about. I'll have to change my monitoring. I monitor normally off air through this plug, which is connected to a scanner receiver up there for VHF. I then, to receive on 2 meters, I monitor off my mixer, and I mix in the output of the radio speaker. So, it being 11 o'clock, is anybody about for a callback? VK3 Alpha Mike Lima, going over the receiver.
VK3 Alpha Charlie Zulu.
VK3 ECG.
I have Peter, VK3ACZ, and Dave, VK3CG. Before we go on, is there anybody else who'd like to call in? VK3AML?
Yes, good day, Chris. VK3GG Mobile. I won't hold it for long because I'm going somewhere, but again, I couldn't receive your pictures of CSIRO and all that on the net. They weren't there, and Nigel confirms that as well. So with whatever system you're using now, it doesn't come on until the next day or the next couple of days. Yes, forgot about the... well, actually, I didn't completely forget about the Baronia Club on Monday, but I got called out to something else, another organisation that I used to do things with, and I sometimes get called in, so I couldn't be in two places at once. Anyway, I'll put it back for a quick over, then I'm nearly there, and then I probably won't be on because I'm mobile on my way to somewhere.
Okay, John, I'll just ask Peter, thanks for that, John. I'll ask Peter if he had any trouble with the YouTube live stream. VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ. Good evening, Chris, Dave and John. Absolutely no trouble at all. Crystal clear, brilliant broadcast. Fantastic. I can truly appreciate the work you put into that. I was listening late on Thursday night when you told everybody there that you'd be doing a bit of a presentation tonight on your broadcast for the EasyPal group on 3RML, Ferny Creek repeater, and so I was looking forward to that, but wasn't quite prepared for how good the CSIRO 2 movie clips would be. The latter one, 1949 at least. What a great piece of history. To be able to see into Jeff VK3VJS's shack was a treasure. Paul Taylor, well, yes, I didn't know what he looked like. I do now after I still haven't seen his website, but I listen to him occasionally on 80 metres, 3686 on AM of an evening, and I've got to say I want to go to Mount Feathertop. I've seen Feathertop from the top of Bogong, the highest point in Victoria, and you look across and it's got a real Mount Fuji sort of a look about it, Feathertop, and now I know, the view's as good as anything I've seen. But anyway, enough waffle for the first over. I hope everybody's well listening tonight and thoroughly enjoyed the broadcast as usual. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Yeah, well, neither Nigel nor I could receive those pictures. It didn't come up. If you just Google in your call sign and today's date and the month and all that, it just wasn't there.
Okay, well, Dave, did you have any trouble? VK3ECG and group, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and group VK3ECG. I think all the videos seem to work very well, actually, Chris. There were a couple of occasions when I had a bit of a gap, but I think it might well have been my my internet this end slowing down. It does this from time to time, and everything caught up, so there was no real issue. I had to disappear just a bit, just in the middle of EasyPal stuff, to go downstairs for a second, so I may have missed the area that John was talking about there. But otherwise all good. I'll make some further comments later. VK3AML and group VK3ECG.
No worries. Well, I just don't quite know what's going wrong at John's end, but maybe you hadn't spelled out February, February. Everybody has trouble spelling February. I used to as well, until I looked it up. I tend to spell it February, February, but it doesn't translate as it sounds, and sometimes people might get flummoxed by that. I wonder if I can redo the way in which I label these to make them something like 12 gap 2 gap 2022, just to simplify things. Not sure. Is anybody else wanting to join the group? VK3 Alpha Mike Lima, standing by.
All your previous things were there, but the current one, this is what's been happening for the last couple of months. If I try and dial it up, I end up with last week and the week before, but not the current one.
Very strange, John. Doesn't affect other people. So there was somebody else under John. Would the other station care to come up?
It did affect Nigel as well. He had the same problem.
There was another breaker there?
Yeah, VK3 Golf Lima Charlie, good evening.
VK3GLC, VK3AML. Yeah, good day. I've forgotten exactly where you are. I'm just looking back. GLC. God, it's been quite a while. VK3GLC, you'll have to remind me. VK3AML.
VK3AML group, VK3GLC, Gary at Roeville. Formerly ZGC, or probably still is. Yes, I had trouble finding your stream too tonight, until I realised, oh, hang on, no, let's try this one labelled 2021 instead of 2022, and Mr. Silvester's picture looked a little bit familiar, so I thought, oh, I haven't seen that one before, so maybe that's the right stream, and sure enough, there it was. So, problem averted. But yeah, all very well received here tonight. I wasn't listening on 2 metres, I was actually inside on the big television, watching the stream via that with a nice set of Bluetooth headphones so as not to drive the rest of the family nutty. VK3AML, group VK3GLC.
And you're dead right, Gary, and I owe an apology to John. Because I slipped, obviously. I'm looking at the web address and it's 12 February 2021. I must have copied that from some other source and made a slip. But if you dialed up VK3AML YouTube, you would have picked up the most recent posting, and that would have been it in spite of the date. So if people are looking for me on YouTube, VK3AML 12 February 2021. What a mistake to make. Sorry, John. But the thing will be there. I'll change the title of it after I go off the air. What an embarrassment. Background to the top to Peter VK3ACZ. Yes, and I was very fortunate to get that interview just on spec with VK3VJS, Jeff. I was having to go down to Spaghetti Junction, Springvale, to Jaycar. It's not the closest Jaycar, but it's the easiest one to access with public transport from here. And as Prue was not feeling up to going out that particular night with the back problem that she's got, it was a case of a bus trip with a mask firmly fastened, and gave Jeff a call on VHF and said, do you mind having a visitor, because it was easy to make a deviation in that direction. So I took my smaller camera with me, the little point and shoot thing, and it does not a too bad job of 4K shooting or of stereo audio. Rather surprising in a thing that fits in your pocket. Gosh, that would have been science fiction 20 years ago. So round to VK3ACZ, and thank you again for the lovely LL400 at a very reasonable price, Peter. I was very relieved to see that somebody had bought a reel of it and had some spare. VK3ACZ, VK3AML and Group.
VK3AML and the group, VK3ACZ. And yes, about that Jaycar visit to Spaghetti Junction, I might need to go there myself, Chris, because my local one in Burwood Highway, Ferntree Gully, doesn't have those connectors. Yes, I might need to visit. They don't seem to have anywhere near as much stock as I saw in your video pictures of that particular store. But anyway, I want you to know that you're the first person who's ever put the wrong year, especially in January or February, on a broadcast or on anything else for that matter. Hi. Yeah, I remember quite fondly in my working life, I was coming back from Albury on the standard gauge, and a locomotive hauled passenger train, and I needed a caution order to pass a signal in a place called McIntyre Loop, which is just the other side of Sunshine. And I negotiated with the train controller, who was a lady over in Adelaide, and there's a special requirement for caution orders where it's dictated to you. You have a special form that you write all this out on, and you spell everything back to them that you've written. Place names. MACINTIRE. LOOP, and the day, date, and all that sort of stuff. And well, first she dictates it like that, and then you write it down and spell it all back. And it was the 3rd of January, I think, and it was only when I got back to the depot and I was filling in my report after having passed the defective signal at the stop position and proceeding cautiously to the next fixed signal and all that stuff, that I suddenly realised we both had the wrong year, even though we'd had this procedure that goes for 3 or 4 minutes, repeating everything and dictated and so forth. So there you go, you're the first one ever. And more fool me too, because when I hooked into tonight's broadcast, I didn't look at the year, I just saw February 12th and went for it, but there you go. And one other thing about Jeff's audio, when he was in the shack, I could hear something going in the background, and I realised his long-wave radio with the beacon from Moorabbin Airport didn't seem to be working, but there was something else going in the background that almost sounded like the constabulary. Wouldn't be, of course. I don't suppose you'd remember what that particular chatter in the background was while you were filming in his shack there, Chris. Back to you.
With the number of receivers that Jeff has going simultaneously, 27 megs UHF-CB, 20 metres, 40 metres, 80 metres, 10 metres... It could have been anything. It's Jeff keeps his ear on just about everything, and he's a great one for fixing up radios that are on the fritz. He has me trying to track down a service manual for that 10 metre radio that was on the fritz on his desk there, that we were looking at the red numbers with the alphanumeric readout. And it's if anybody listening knows where I can get a service manual, this would do Jeff a great favour, for an AZDEN, AZDEN 10 metre transceiver, and its numbers are PCS 2800. That's an AZDEN, AZDEN, PCS 2800. Jeff is looking for a service or instruction manual for it. It's a 10 metre only radio, not CB, 28 megs, and looks like a pretty good job actually, but the transmitter needs a bit of attention. The receiver's okay apparently, so hopefully something might come of that. I'll check on the YouTube live stream text there. No, nobody's responded to that particular one. Gosh, look at the number of people on the text. Alan Giles, Paul 3HN, nice to see you there, Paul, and thank you for the usage of your footage. Terry Sims, Ponderoof, 3ZGC, L2 Repeats, who's asking me, have I considered simultaneous broadcasting on Rumble, which is more stable than YouTube? I haven't heard of Rumble. I must look into it. But everybody knows where YouTube is, and the great thing about it is that at the end of each night's session, it's all recorded in perpetuity, so that if I put up a video clip there, it's just a matter of me remembering which week I put it on. NPI test, got the call sign wrong. I will blame Craft. Can't remember a flaming thing. Okay, Craft. I'll take your word at it. NPI test. Anyway, around today, VK3ECG, how's your week been? And I hope your dental work hasn't given you any problem. VK3ECG and group VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and group VK3CG. Yes, I couldn't hear Gary, but yes. No, the week's been good. And yes, I completely missed the header being incorrect. I just typed in the correct names it should have been, and it brought up the other one, and everything seemed fine, so I didn't bother to look any further. But yes, it happens, doesn't it? It's like I usually spend the most of January and first bit of February signing all the paperwork I have to sign various things with the wrong date. And the trouble is, with some of them, when you have to correct the date on the document, you then have to initial and redate it. And on occasions, I have then initials and redated my correction and put the initials date as the wrong date again. So this strikes you into a sort of permanent infinity loop of having to then initial the correction to your initialed correction. I tell you, when you do stuff for government regulation departments, it does get a little bit on the humorous side sometimes, if not crazy. Yeah, the week's good. My tooth is a lot better, which is fabulous, and I'm actually starting to eat on both sides again, which is nice. Yeah, great set of videos. I really love the CSIRO at the beginning, including the CSIRAC as well, because I've got a bit of interesting link to the CSIRAC stuff in the sense that Peter and Kay Thorne, who worked on that, of course, and their daughter was still is my senior policy person I work with every day, and we've worked together for I don't know, it must be 10 years or so now, and on occasions I've met them and met Peter. In fact, on one occasion I was doing one of my ABC things, and I think it was the anniversary of the computer or something like that, some date anyway, and he was on the ABC breakfast program, and he was sort of leaving as I was going in to do my forensic session. But yeah, very nice people and so on. So that was really interesting. and a fascinating bit of Melbourne history as well around all that. At the moment, I'm just trying to put together some stuff for tomorrow for where my wife's early music and dance group thing they've got a small concert tomorrow in Brighton, in the church in Black Street, and I said I'd do a quick video of it and or bits of it at least, and just do an audio. Simple audio recording, because they don't want microphones everywhere and things like that, so it'll be a bit low res, but it'll be enough for just to put something up on YouTube and things like that. I think it's going to be I think it's Baroque dancing actually, rather than Renaissance on this occasion, and then there'll be the early music consort playing as well, so I'll try to capture as much of that as I can without being too obtrusive. Often a bit challenging, but some years ago I got hold of one of those Zoom audio recorders, the little H4N. I found it second-hand somewhere on eBay or something, and it's been really good. It's great value. It's got its own built-in microphones, which are the XY configuration, which is not too bad, and adjustable to sort of 120 or 90, and it's also got XLR connections at the bottom as well, so you can actually do 4-channel recording on it, although I'm just going to, keeping things very simple, just use the internal microphones rather than connecting the externals, although I'm sure that will be a lot better, but it will be much more obtrusive. So yes, I'll get that all sorted out, and just sorting out sort of batteries and bits and pieces. It's not a long concert, so I won't need anything in the way of elaborate power supplies, but I always tend to do a bit of belt and braces and bring spares and bits and pieces like that, just in case anything goes wrong. I shall have a little test run early tomorrow morning, make sure it's all working appropriately. Anyway, back to you. VK3AML and the group VK3ECG.
Leaving a bit of a gap in case anybody wanted to speak. Well, the Zoom, I'm just holding that up to the webcam. I wonder if it'll snap into focus at some stage. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The Zoom H2, which is the one I've got, has 4 mics, 2 at the back, 2 at the front, which they switch in differing phasing to get different directional effects. But this thing can sample native up to 96 kilohertz on all 4 channels and record in 4-channel stereo, 4 independent channels. It's an amazing device. I picked this one up at Salt Lake City on my trip over there in 2008. Cost about, I think, $300, maybe close to $400 at the time. But it's been absolutely reliable. The sig to noise is impeccable. Records without any moving parts onto a memory card. The only thing is that these early ones, unlike the more recent versions, the more recent ones have usually 2 microphones very firmly mounted in the top, and you can angle them in different ways to get different effects mechanically. And these early wave file recorders also were a little bit plasticky, and not quite as have the build quality of the Tascam and other more recent all-in-one portable pocket digital recorders. But I've used that in all sorts of ways. I've used it to remaster off 78 RPM discs direct from the preamp. Impeccable quality and slew rate and all the rest of it from the preamps in it. Very happy with it. So I'm not surprised that you get good results from your H4, which I think is a slightly more modern version of that thing. I got that one, by the way, the Zoom H2, in 2008. So it goes back quite a way. Still very usable. Runs on 2 penlight cells. A reminder for every married man and some unmarried men listening, Monday is Valentine's Day. Remember your lady fair or prepare to meet the consequences. Valentine's Day, 14th of February on Monday. Please remember it. Anyway, with that, around, if he's still there, to VK3GG with VK3XKU, if you're there. Nothing heard. Looks like they've dropped out. VK3GLC, Gary at Rowville. Are you still with us? VK3AML.
Thank you, Chris. I am indeed. And yes, I did note your little issue with the the date on the live stream, but never mind. So I was able to work it out and sort of hook into that. I was actually listening to something on another band, and I realised, oh, it's time for the live stream, so let's have a listen. So we did. And well, I say we, myself and at least one of the dogs was in here with me, and then, as I say, we retired down to the comfort of the lounge to watch you on the big screen. But very informative session indeed, as always. So it was working quite well. Don't have a great deal to add really. Haven't been playing too much radio or anything this week. The former employer of mine has decided to ask me back into the fold to help them out for 6 months, so I'm spending most of the week remote working and directing the universe, so as to speak, from various computer screens, and it's taken me nigh on 6 weeks to get back up and running properly with access to all of the applications. Nothing happens overnight, but probably only missing 1 or 2 items, so not too bad at all. So that'll be happening for a little while, and occasionally escape out here of an evening to mainly tidy up from the mess that has ensued over the last 12 months, but getting there slowly. Well, yeah, thanks for letting me in, and I might make this one my last one. Better go in and see what the other dog is up to, and see what the good lady is up to, lest I fall foul of any dramas in that respect. Shouldn't do, but wouldn't like to predict it. We bid you all a good evening, and talk to you again. Back to you, Chris. VK3AML Group, VK3GLC.
VK3GLC, just before you go, somebody on the text beside the stream has asked, and I quote, this is somebody calling themselves NPI Test. I just heard Chris say ZGC again. Is that ZGC from my previous Clayton workplace? Does that mean anything to you, Gary?
Yes, it is. It is one in the same. ZGC and GLC are sort of interchangeable. I still hold both licenses. Decided to get the GLC one for laughs last year, and I'm mainly using that, but most of my digital work is done with the old call sign of ZGC, which is effectively sheer laziness, because I can't be bothered updating all the databases, especially digital radio ones. Gets all too difficult, but yes, that particular person is one in the same, and yeah, while I'm not in at Clayton at the moment, that's where I would normally be working if I was in the office, so as to speak. Chris, go ahead.
Oh, well, I hope you know who it is. I'm not quite sure who. I just see him on there on a fairly regular basis from week to week as NPI Test, and I don't know whether that means he's 3 NPI. But it's obviously somebody who's worked with you in the recent past.
Yes, there are a few radio amateurs floating around there. Ian 3IFM was one of them. Bruno Tonizzo, I can't remember his call sign now, B something or other, was another one. It was many and varied. And actually, before I disappear, I was going to make a comment. Your session on Craig CRG's YouTube channel last week. All well received on that. Just make a note that Craig is now working down at Bay FM at Geelong, as soon as he lives at Lara. But I think he's still freelancing for 10 every now and again. But that's his main gig. I'm sure you should catch him on the morning show on the web, from what I can gather. Chris, go ahead.
Okay, might just do that. An NPI test has just identified himself as VK3XDW, if that means anything to you.
Will do shortly when I go through my notes. Yeah, well, thanks for all of that, Chris, and I'll leave you all with it, and I trust you all have a good week and enjoy what's left of the weekend. VK3 Golf Lima Charlie.
Thanks very much, Gary, and all the best to you. And hello on the stream to Anthony, VK3JIA, whose several sales to Jeff I saw down at Jeff's place only a few days ago. And all the best to you, Anthony. I hope things are settling with the relocation closer in to us, and I look forward to the time when we can speak to you on VHF a little bit more reliably than we used to down to Arrawatta, Leongatha. So it's round again to Peter at top of the list, VK3 ACZ and group. I hope you don't forget Valentine's Day for the other half, Peter. VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group VK3ACZ. And good evening, Gary, if you're still listening. I forgot to say good day before. You were the topic of conversation this afternoon. A certain bicycle mobile ham was reported on 2 metres that he was going past your house, and another ham who lives near you said chuck a grenade over his fence. But don't worry, he was only joking. Hi. And all good there. Speaking of which, Gary's friend Michael, VK3CMC, achieved his little ambition of working at 160 metres Treadley Mobile during the week, and in fact it's even been put up as a YouTube video. What he doesn't say is how far away the other station was that he was working, mind you, but we won't let any facts get in the way of a good story. He did actually record himself with his camera riding along on a bumpy road or footpath working 160, so there you go. And yes, thank you for the warning about Valentine's Day. I will heed that definitely, although we're heading off towards the bush for the Sherbrooke Radio Club camp out and radio week up the hills, hopefully getting some good contacts too. I've got to quickly tell you about 10 metres, and Dave, you might be interested in this as well. I got a text message from somebody this morning to say that the band, the 11 metres, was going crazy with Americans, so I wouldn't waste my time on such frequencies. Went straight to 10 metres and was amazed with what I heard. There were Americans all over the place on 10 sideband. Dita, 3 Fox Bravo in Heathmont, came up and immediately started calling CQ and gave reports of 5-9 to Americans that I couldn't hear. I went to the SDR 5ARG and heard the other side of all these conversations quite clearly. In fact, I started to get worried that he could hear them so well and I couldn't until I went on to Paul's SDR3 KHZ and couldn't hear on that one either. So Dita must have just been in the sweet spot there at Heathmont. But after that, lots of stations came in, not strong with me. I also heard an X-Ray Fox, the first Mexican I've ever heard on any band. And it was just for 3 hours, I don't know, from 11 until 1 or close to 2 o'clock. It was bedlam, and it only made it worse when the sporadic E started, and we started hearing all the VK2s and 4s and 5s and everybody else coming in as well. I note that the sun had a bit of a hissy fit and flew off some energy, so that perhaps increased propagation for a while before degrading it, as it sometimes seems to do. But yeah, it's been an incredible day. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Okay, thanks, Pete. It's 10 metres. I must listen to it more often around lunchtime by the sounds of it. That's probably when it peaks up. and a message for VK3VJS from Terry. Terry has located the schematics for the Asden PCS 2800 according to his text conveyance, and he said he'll send them on somehow to you, Jeff, if you're listening, Jeff VK3VJS. So hopefully that'll sort it out. I did a bit of a search, but I'm not a subscriber to any of the sites that professionally provide schematics and service manuals, whereas I think Terry might, and Terry's obviously nailed it. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that, and whether that rather nice little transceiver that was on your desk, Jeff, can be set back in action. And contrary to what you say, Jeff, I think you looked reasonably good on the day for somebody who hadn't been particularly prepared for it. And I did ask permission, people. I did ask permission. Anyway, round 2, Dave, VK3 ECG and group, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group VK3 ECG, yes. Yeah, unfortunately I can't hear Gary, so I have to nip across to the YouTube channel and so on, but and then the delay makes you almost miss out the next conversation. Yes, I had a quick look around, and there were a couple of sites, but as I said, I don't have accounts on those manual sites. So, but I'm sure as you dig and browse further, you can often find bits and pieces around as to whether there's a service manual. That's the trouble, because often you can find the generic user manuals for some of these. I remember that Asden Radio and so on. Goes back a while though, but yeah, they were popular for a while, particularly I suppose the last time the Sunset cycle was up, or the one before that in the cycle. Yeah, the Zoom recorder is great. I think my H4 is pretty much the same generation as the H2. There was the H2 and the H4 were the two. The sort of H2 was a bit more sort of integrated. Whereas the H4's got the two little condenser microphones on the top, which you can adjust the angles of slightly, and then the XLR connections at the base, and then there's a small sort of 3.5 jack that allows you to put another microphone in, which replaces the little inbuilt condenser ones. But otherwise, I think it's pretty much the same sort of system. In fact, I think the H2 was certainly a bit easier probably to use, because you could just sort of sit it in the middle and it would pick up all the sides and so on, whereas the H4n isn't. There's an H4n Pro, I think, that came out much later, and I think now there's an H5, and that has pluggable microphones. So you can actually get sort of a shotgun microphone. You can get a whole variety of different microphone units to plug in with their own little sort of preamp and gain control on them at the top of the box. They're quite pricey, some of them, and I've never had the need to do anything like that, because I'm really only using it for sort of ambient type recordings. But I used to take it along to conferences, and I made quite a few recordings of interviewing various people, and the plan was to sort of put those up at some stage as a sort of small podcast, and hopefully this year I'll be able to get around to a bit of that, because I'm moving to working a bit more part-time. Although I must say, even though I'm part-time, I seem to have got myself involved in a whole load of writing things and book chapters and bits and pieces like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But they're moving along quite nicely, so it shouldn't be too bad. Yes, I like the Parkes Telescope documentary. That was rather nice, and it keeps reminding me of that Bond film, which is remarkably silly. And I must say, I was slightly concerned about the OH&S sides of those devices, and certainly moving the dish while somebody was on it. But I suspect it's going very, very slowly indeed, and therefore there's not too much of a problem. But the lift was quite cute. I agree. It does make you wonder though, with all of those are there electrical systems there? I mean, they must isolate them and presumably do a whole variety of, very, very carefully sort of earth isolation systems in place to, with all of that layer on of service equipment to ensure that the sensor electronics were not adverse affected. But I presume they just dismantled sort of effectively everything electrically when it was in real use. On the Kiwi SDR stuff, one of the things I found looking at the Kiwi SDR lists was using that site from VE3SUN. That site's quite nice because it lists the sort of current recorded dB signal noise dB, and gives you indications of how many are on and so on, which is actually quite a useful thing to do if you're looking around for the right SDR to connect to. So I found that quite useful. Though I haven't played around with sort of direction finding things that people talk about on it yet, but that'll be interesting to have a look at that. And yes, I've enjoyed looking at Paul Taylor's site before now, and I must do that Feathertop walk. I haven't been up that way for a long time actually, but I've been getting out doing more local walks, so something like that would be a great thing to do. And I am now equipped to at least do some sort of low power operating when I'm out and about, which I've done a couple of times, which has been quite fun. So I think that could work very well. Back to you, Chris. VK3AML and Group VK3ECG.
Do we have any other breakers for the group before I go on?
VKS with a quick comment.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Good evening, all. Enjoyed it, Chris. It was a bit slow picking it up originally, but then it just suddenly came good, so I was able to watch it all on the tablet. Enjoyed it very much, and you swine. You didn't even let me get my false teeth in. Well, next time give us a bit of warning, and at least I'll have a decent T-shirt on. I look like something from the op shop. But all in all, a very interesting program, Chris. And if Terry's listening, I'd appreciate it if you could print it out to me, Terry, and send it to me via slow boat, wherever it ends up, wherever it goes by, Australia Post, and I'll reimburse you for any expenses. Thank you, Terry. Okay, Chris, cheers to all, and interesting to hear that Anthony was watching as well down there at Doveton. So this is VK3VJS off and clear. Good evening all. I'll still be listening, but good evening. Thanks again, Chris.
On the contrary, Jeff, thank you. That video was just made off the top of my head. As I discussed with you, there's quite a few amateurs I probably should just have a talk to for these Saturday night sessions. One of them high on the list is Ralph Klimek, VK3ZZC, who has a very interesting history in some very technical work and has a wide-ranging knowledge of medical and electronic gadgetry of a high-tech variety. Very interesting person to talk to. Frequently had long ragtube QSOs with him late into the night on Simplex from Chelsea, so I should hop on the bus down to Chelsea with a decent camera and have a chat to him, and then possibly stick it up on a Saturday night on here. I'll become a feared character if I continue in that vein, won't I? I wonder whether I should. Power. I'll see if anybody else is there. Gary GLC, I think, said he was signing clear. I'll just leave a gap there in case he'd like to come in. VK3GLC, still there? No. And somebody signing themselves as Radio Australia has just said on the text chat for the benefit of VK3VJS, he loves the fan on the fence. Jeff. A bit of whimsy. What are we saying here? L2 repeats, one of the YouTubes I watch simultaneously broadcast to the following. There are about 10 other simultaneous streaming sites. I think the only reason I use YouTube live stream is that it's also used by my friend 3SL, Steve Langley, who gave me the initial chat on how to set it up. Just the other sites are not as familiar to me. The only thing I have against YouTube livestream is that it does seem to depend on internet usage as to whether it's reliable or not. And I can't stream at higher than 1080, even though I have some video equipment that'll do 4K. And the other thing is that it has a long latency of about 30 seconds. It would appear that the signal, the video stream, goes to America and then comes back and goes through a few storage systems in between here and there. So it's back to Peter, I guess, with a pause for any breakers in case we've got some. VK3ACZ with a pause, VK3AML.
VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ. Thanks, Chris. And a couple of comments to direct towards Jeff. He said he'd still be listening. Jeff, I wholeheartedly agree with you about Radio Australia. Since the ABC's been given a bit of extra money, there was a 3 in there. Was it 3 billion? Oh, I don't know, some great amount of money they've been given. They should reintroduce that HF service up the top end. I used to listen to it a bit, mainly because I could, not that there was an actual need, but sometimes listening to the Tiwi Islands football broadcasts, other times just to catch a little bit of Tony Delroy's program broadcast up there on 2.3, I think there are 3 HF frequencies up there anyway, but used to listen to a bit of it because I could. It'd be nice to have it back on. I could imagine travelling through the far out back and finding it quite comforting if you could listen to radio out the back and beyond like that. And also, Jeff, don't be self-conscious. I thought you looked fine. Mind you, I was busy trying to look at all the radio gear you had in your shack and the QSL cards on the wall and all that. Very, very good. It was good to see, so don't you worry about a thing. Anyway, back to you, Chris, VK3AML and the group VK3ACZ.
Yeah, no worries. The HF service for the top end, I think VK3ASC, who used to do the missions, is talking about moving to the bush and establishing some sort of a broadcast service on 2.3 megs around about where those services used to be. So you might find that VK3ASC is it. He may be the missing service reintroduced. It doesn't take all that much money to do it. It's more the time. And the thing that would worry me more than anything else, the equipment would be, if you have the background, reasonably straightforward, and the antennas don't have to be extremely high for near vertical incidence, as those old 2.3 meg broadcast services were. The problem would be finding enough material, musical, spoken word, whatever, to actually keep the service going. And the licensing fees for music, I believe, can be very stiff. The licensing for the station, I think, a broadcast service, I heard quoted by somebody in the know that they can't get rid of HF broadcasting licenses, and I think it costs, unlike the normal FM AM licenses, which cost hundreds of thousands, you can have an HF license for about $400 a year, I think was the figure quoted. And considering the broadcast covers an incredible area, it's not a huge amount to pay. A bit of a slug to the wallet, but if you've got a reasonable superannuation, what the hey. Now, about the Kiwi SDRs, I note that there are 2 basic systems. There's the Kiwi SDR, which I think is the most adaptable, and it's certainly the one that's been subject to the most improvement. And then there's the original web-SDR system run by the University of Twente in Holland, Twente. But for that, you need a computer fitted with either HTML5, which my computer doesn't have, or JavaScript, which my computer doesn't have. So I can get the waterfall display on the University of Twente, but I get no sound. So I would have to, I guess, download Java for that. L2 repeats. I think YouTube is slower, and there are a few algorithms above it. I did an FOI Freedom of Information to the ABC about the closure of the HF service, and the ABC could not answer it and said they had the information but said they could not release it as they considered it a board in confidence decision. I would suggest that perhaps Michelle Guthrie had more of a destroying hand than she's been credited. So L2 Repeats has asked, apparently, in official circles and got a yes, Prime Minister obstructive answer on those HF services. Back round to Peter, unless we have any other breakers. VK3ACZ with a... Oh, is it ECG? I'm not sure. I'll hand it to you, Peter. I'm getting a little bit on the tired side, I must admit. Incidentally, I may or may not be on next week, and I may be off for a couple of weeks. Two reasons. The main reason is 23rd of February, my wife is having major back surgery. We'll be stuck in hospital for 2 weeks, and I won't be able to visit her, so I'll have my hands full organising bills and doing all the things that the two of us normally do, and of course visiting Prue as much as I can, and also when she's in recuperation mode with this severe back surgery that she's got to have, my time will be limited, so I might cut this back to once every 2 weeks for a month or two. The other reason that I may be off next week is that, of course, I've got this new U-Butte LL400 feed line. I've got the connectors, which you probably saw earlier in the stream, to put on it for maximum strength, minimum loss. And I have to bring the diamond 2 metre 70 centimetre antenna down because it has slipped 10 centimetres down the pole, and the active part of the antenna at the bottom is now in parallel with, not above, the metal supporting mast. So it's probably affecting my SWR a little at this stage, but it can only get worse. So I need to rebolt it there, put the new feed line on, and things will improve a little on 2 metres, but I think they'll improve a lot on 70 sems. I hand it to you, Peter, and then if that's wrong, if you could hand it to Dave. VK3ACZ, VK3AML and group.
Yeah, over to you, Dave.
Yeah, VK3AML, VK and group, VK3ECG. Yes, well, good luck with the surgery. I'm sure all will go well. These things are fairly standard these days, even though it seems very dramatic. It's all, in fact, recoveries are so much faster these days than it used to be years ago, and which I think is great. But anything that relieves the back pain, I know it only too well, having had a significant disc prolapse for 18 months on one occasion a few years ago, and was very much on the edge of needing surgery. And but I decided to forego that and see what happened, and it did eventually degenerate, but the disc, and eventually lost the compression. But it took a long time, and it was not a pleasant time during that, so I know exactly what it's like. I'll probably be a little bit absent myself, not so much next couple of weeks, but I've got to go to Sydney at the end of the month, so I'll be away in a bit. I might take something with me, but I don't think I'll be making this, although I will probably be able to listen in on the YouTube if there's not some other competing event at that time of night, which is certainly possible. Knowing what conferences can be like, most of the significant work tends to be done outside the conference, of course, and that actually is actually surprisingly quite important. But there we are. Yes, the HF activity has been really interesting, Peter, and certainly I've been hearing a lot more on 15 metres as well, which is interesting. And again, certainly you've just got to get the right time, and I haven't been around. I should get some monitoring up running properly for 10 metres and so on, because I know I can sort of get myself listed and get little messages on the phone and things like that when things open up, but I have never really organised doing that. It's just a question of when I can have time to come up and sit quietly in the shack and listen around, which is nice. And if it happens with the right time, it's the right time. If it doesn't, well, that's just too bad at the moment. But there we are. I'm going to probably pull the pin now, because I do want to get a little bit of sleep, so that I'm wide awake to adjust the audio levels and things like that. Well, it can be automatic these days, for tomorrow, and help, because we'll do a little bit of helping with the group as well, packing and unpacking and moving things. And I think Sally, my wife, is going to be doing some rat tests and things like that, and so on, because of all the complications of running a public event at the moment. And that's not insignificant these days. And even we're down to, every time I go into work, which is only for 1 or 2 days a week now, I'm obviously testing myself before I go in and things like that. So at least I'm fairly familiar with doing those sorts of tests. Anyway, look, I'll wish everyone well, and give Prue my best wishes for the surgery, and I'm sure all will be well, and you'll be able to get around a lot more easily afterwards. Fantastic! It's an amazing process having those things fixed. I'll say cheerio, everyone, and thanks very much for tonight's videos, Chris. They were really interesting, and discussion as well. Cheers then from VK3 ECG.
Yeah, good. VK3 ECG, and I'm feeling a little bit pooped myself, so I might cut it a little bit short. Perhaps I'll hand it round to you, Peter, and we can start looking at winding up around midnight. VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group, fast diminishing group VK3ACZ. And good evening, Dave. Thanks for being there as per usual. And just quickly before you go, I concur with your comment about how things are much more streamlined nowadays. Remember back to my nursing in the 70s, where a fractured noff would buy you at least 3 months in hospital, and learning to walk again on the parallel bars. And some patients with a hip replacement, it was their death sentence. They just, you could see them, they'd be led to the parallel bars, and there was this look of defeat, no, I won't get on this again. And they were the ones that would fade away and die, whereas the others would inspire you with their confidence to get back and learn to walk again. Whereas nowadays, my next door neighbour broke her hip, and she was home from hospital in 4 days. I just couldn't believe it. Mind you, I was there that night visiting in hospital, and she's waving her leg around, and I was wincing in agony myself, because I thought, oh, that's only because she's on all the good morphine. But anyway, no, things are much, much improved to what they used to be with orthopaedics and surgery in general, it seems to be, with the keyhole stuff and the like. But anyway, so best wishes for what Prue's going through, and fully understand if you're not having your Saturday night broadcast. Of course, family comes first, and best wishes and all that for you all. She's a champion, your Prue, and you must take good care of her. And thank you again for the reminder not to forget Valentine's Day on Monday. Some will be only thinking that it's the Super Bowl, perhaps, but as my team are not in it, not relevant. Anyway, cheers and 7-3, Chris. Thank you again for an amazing broadcast. I don't know what my favourite would be. Probably the 1949 CSIRO film, that was a real treasure that you have hung on to and were able to share with us. So anyway, good night to all, and look forward to doing it again soon. VK3AML, VK3ACZ. Cheers, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Very much appreciate that, and that's one of those things just you have to go through. My wife has spinal cord pinching, which is causing weakness and pain in her left leg, basically. And if something is not done, she may end up paraplegic, which is the last thing that she wants. But she has a number of bone problems that probably are partly an inheritance from her work as a nurse over 40 years. You spend a lot of time on your feet as a nurse, and that eventually can have consequences. So it's just coming up to midnight. I'll just ask if anybody else is out there that would like a quick chat before we close. Thank you for your support. We've had a large number of people watching. 138 playbacks on the video stream, 15 concurrent viewers even at the moment. I'm looking at the stats, so that's gone pretty well, and I don't think we've had any major glitches. Again, if anybody, this includes you, Terry, has the service or instruction manual for the AZDEN, AZDEN 10 metre FM transceiver, serial number Papa Charlie Sierra 2800, PCS 2800. Please let me know, or Jeff if you have his email. If you want my email, it's VK3AML at optusnet, optusnet.com.au. That's VK3AML at optusnet.com.au, and that should reach me fairly promptly. Thank you for your support. I'll take a final listen before closing. Anybody else want to have a quick word? VK3AML standing by. Okay, sounds like I've tied the ribbons for the week. Have a good week, people. And remember, if you're a ham radio operator and I turn up with a camera, you may be the victim. VK3AML signing clear. All the best.
You swine. VK3VJS clear.
Ditto, Jeff, ditto. Well, it worked out quite well. VK3AML.
Cheers, Chris. Thank you again.
Cheers, and thank you. VK3AML now clear. And for the people on the stream, just looking at the list there, NPI test 27355 is always busy. Boy, is it what? I sometimes listen on 27355 from the VK5 ARG remote web-SDR that's up about 100 kilometres north of Adelaide. Very quiet location, very sensitive receiver. And as soon as 10 metre propagation is on, it's on for young and old. I've learned a lot of four-letter words that in 65 years of living I never knew. The fan on the fence. Anyway, to Terry Sims, thank you. If you could chuck the ASDEN literature across to us, or contact Jeff directly, that'd be appreciated. Pirate, nice to see you there again. NPI test. Who else now? Ponderoof, nice to see you there. Gosh, there's quite a few people that have put on lots of comments there. I'll have to read them in detail afterwards. But with that, I'll say all the best. Hopefully till next week. If not, there may be a bit of a gap, but do look for my postings, my YouTube live stream postings, and I will correct the title of this posting to 12th February 2022. What a stupid thing to do. Put up 12th of February 2021. God, Sometimes my stupidity amazes me. All the best, people. We'll see you another week.